Keir Starmer did his absolute best to boot veteran Labour MP Diane Abbott out of the party before the last election, and he failed miserably. Now, there's an old piece of wisdom that goes like this: never pick a fight you can't finish. And Diane Abbott, gloves off, unbothered and uncensored, has become the walking embodiment of that eternal truth. On Tuesday, Starmer's government announced they would be refusing financial compensation to potentially millions of so-called WASPy women. These are women born in the 1950s who may have suffered significant financial hardship after successive governments failed to notify them of changes to the retirement age that would affect their pension arrangements. In Prime Minister's question on Wednesday, Diane Abbott openly attacked Starmer over the decision.
WASPy women fought one of the most sustained and passionate campaigns for justice that I can remember, year in, year out. We did promise them that we would give them justice. I understand the issue about the cost, but does the Prime Minister really understand how let down WASPy women feel today?
I do understand the concern, of course I do. I set out the history, Mr. Speaker, but the research is clear that 90% of those impacted did know about the change. And in those circumstances, the taxpayer simply can't afford the burden of tens of billions of pounds of compensation.
Now, Starmer might have thought his trademark, smug, technocratic little answers was the end of it. Not Diane Abbott, though. Last night, she appeared on Newsnight, where this happened.
So you asked Diane Abbott, do you, Prime Minister, really understand how let down WASPy women feel? He said he did understand.
No, he doesn't. That's the problem. He doesn't. One of the things about Keir is he's only been in the party a relatively short period of time. He was DPP until, I think, 2014, and he couldn't have been a member of the party. Then he got parachuted into... he got parachuted into...
St Pancras.
Hobart, just parachuted in, didn't have to contest for it. Then, because it was a safe seat, he didn't have to fight for that. And he has no feel for politics. Now, he might say, I've got a great feel for politics because I smashed people like you. But he's got no feel for politics. He doesn't understand how they feel. Remember, he's on his big fat DPP pension. What does he know about, ageing women who really will depend on the state pension? He doesn't know.
Now, it's worth delving into the details of that big fat DPP pension that Diane Abbott mentioned there. This is from the BBC. After standing down as Director of Public Prosecutions, he was granted a tax-unregistered pension scheme by an Act of Parliament. The pensions increase, Pension Scheme for Keir Starmer QC Regulations 2013, introduced through secondary legislation, means that a lifetime allowance does not apply to his contributions from his time as DPP between 2008 and 2013. The legislation means Sir Keir is exempt from paying tax on pension savings over £1 million. So Keir Starmer has an Act of Parliament with his name in it, specifically designed to maximise his pension by granting a tax exemption. So I would say that Abbott is spot on. That does make it impossible for him to understand how the WASPy women feel. But Victoria Derbyshire seemed pretty shocked by that body blow from Abbott.
He is your leader.
Absolutely.
He is your Prime Minister.
Yes. No, he's my leader and he's my Prime Minister. Therefore, I'm entitled to say what I think. There's more I could say, but I've said...
Diane, go on.
But I've said the minimum. But no, he doesn't understand how they feel.
But this story goes beyond Starmer being unable to feel empathy. The fact that our government has the political will to line the already pretty fat pockets of senior politicians, but does not have the political will to do simple things that give working class people what they are owed, reveals the political ideology our government operates on, which extends far beyond Keir Starmer. I mean, this act was introduced before Keir Starmer, I think, was even an MP. Whenever working class and even middle class people are cheated of what they are entitled to, whether it's a livable pension, a wage that increases in line with inflation, a decent social security system, it's presented to us as a difficult decision that nonetheless was inevitable, that, it's the result of some kind of natural economic law that we have to abide by. But all these natural economic laws seem to go out of the window when it comes to protecting the wealth and assets of the already rich. So much so that an elite political figure like Starmer can literally have a bill with his name on it so he can be personally exempted from a long-standing rule, just so he can get an extra wad of cash that he probably doesn't even need. Helena, what did you make of Diane Abbott's intervention? Does she have any more fucks to give?
I mean, what a queen, what an absolute icon Diane Abbott is, just saying what she thinks. And she can get away with it now. She can get away with it. She's won the fight. Remember all of those kind of months back where there was the discussion over Diane Abbott's potential to not be a candidate at the 2024 election, where she was still suspended over the letter that she wrote into the Observer, but they didn't quite know when she was going to be given the whip back, but we all knew it was in Keir Starmer's control to give it back to her, but they kept telling us that it wasn't. And then she just was allowed, after the furore that was kicked up over Faisal Shaheen first and then over her potential removal from standing as a candidate at the election. And the Labour leadership backed down. And then she knew she was untouchable from then. She knew that the public outcry over how the way that they treated her gave her this level of immunity that other people weren't given the same way that she was. And she has exploited this to the nth degree to say what she really thinks. I can already feel a pixelated photo of Keir Starmer brewing with Diane Abbott to be able to post on Twitter, or our team to post about him on Twitter. But I think it speaks, the idea of him not being particularly politically savvy, it really speaks to the history of Keir Starmer as a politician, in that he was parachuted into Hopelands of Pancras in 2015. He doesn't have any political instincts. He was parachuted in to potentially be Ed Miliband's Director of Public Prosecutions if they happened to win the 2015 election. That's why he was inserted as a candidate. He was inserted as the leader because he was approached in the background by Labour Together in 2017 to be their person who would be the replacement for Corbynism. He was going to be their figurehead to defeat Corbynism internally within the party. And again, he was just thrust into this. He's the accidental Prime Minister, operated in the background by McSweeney and McFadden, who doesn't have any real political convictions of his own. And one last thing I would say is that this is another broken promise, and a long line of broken promises, of mistruths, and of course, what they really are, which is lies, that's been told by Keir Starmer throughout the history of his time being the leader of the opposition, being the Prime Minister, in that, of course, he was standing with WASPI women. He said on Radio 4 he was going to protect WASPI women. And then what happens when he gets into government? The technocracy goes out the window. We'll ignore the ombudsman. We'll subcontract out policy to whoever else, but in the meantime on something that's less important than this. When it comes to this one, we'll just ignore the ombudsman. We'll ignore the independent body that's trying to set what they should go into. And I will break my promise that I made to these people all of those years ago. And ITV News, they have this vodcast where they talk about politics, right? And they had one about this, and they described it as Keir Starmer's honesty problem. That's a bit of a weird way of trying to describe someone who lies all the time. And honestly, that's the level to which that's trying to manufacture consent for this idea that, when it was lying to the left, that was politically savvy. When he was doing it in the run-up to the election, that was fine to try and win the election. And now, it's just a bit of an honesty problem, that level of editorialization for what is plain to see for everybody. Like, the man's a liar. There was a Savanta poll about the one word to describe Keir Starmer from members of the public, and the biggest result that came back was that he's a liar. It seems to be the only thing that he's known for within the public, is that he breaks promises. And you know what? Diane Abbott was absolutely right to say this man doesn't have a knack for politics, because if you just continue to lie, if that's your political strategy, just to lie to people, it will eventually catch up with you. And that's what's happening now.
When Starmer won the election, lots of sort of centrists and policy wonks and technocrats, that tiny little cluster of people who live in this bubble, who tend to like the kind of technocratic Starmerites of the world, they sort of took this as a really big vindication of their political vision. And what I would say to them is that I have never seen the media elite and the political elite, the journalistic elite, more aggressively root for someone like they have rooted for Keir Starmer, like you said, like constantly trying to rehabilitate his really obviously odious personality and to try and make him into this like likable figure. And yet I don't think you could find a single person, a single ordinary person who's not in the like Westminster bubble, who's not in the like tiny little bubble of think tanks and, you know, all these, you know, like lobby journalists and all that, who organically thinks that Keir Starmer is a good person, even just like as basic as that, let alone a good politician. And I've never seen a man who's been so heavily, who's given so many legs up by the media and yet has like failed to make that into anything organic. He's just so deeply unpopular, despite all of these, as you said, highly editorialized attempts to gaslight us into thinking that this is a popular man. Like when Diane Abbott was nearly deselected, people in her constituents flooded the streets to say, like, you will not do this to our Diane. If tomorrow, through some apps, through some, you know, freak situation, Keir Starmer was deselected as Prime Minister or expelled from the Labour Party, I don't think a single person would care, let alone mourn the fact that he was no longer a politician. I think actually many people would just breathe a sigh of relief. They don't have to listen to that voice anymore. It's annoying.